Next we have is recent economic slowdown. Sir, your wish is my command. करवा दूं के बाद हुआ थोड़ी कुछ या ऑफ हो गया? आपसे The very simple diagram of twin balance sheet. बहुत ही सिंपल है, अपने आप समझ में आ जाएगा. जो डायग्राम बनाया था ग्रोथ ड्राइवर्स वाला, उसमें थोड़ा वैल्यू एडिशन कर लो. कंजम्पशन, एक्सपोर्ट, पब्लिक एंड प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट. सो अंडर दिस प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट, although after पहले समझ लो, although after demonetization cash with the banks increased. ठीक है? So ideally the credit growth should increase because banks are having excess funds. So banks have borrowed from somebody. This is regarded A and B. You deposited some funds under FD or savings account. So bank is liable to pay you at least savings rate 4% or FD 6%, 7%, whatever the amount is. If the bank is not lending to anybody, if credit growth is not increasing, it means the bank is not lending. It is accumulating all the cash with them or maybe giving to the. So if they are not lending, ideally their profit margins are decreasing. Because if the banks are depositing with the RBI gives very less interest rate because no risk is there. When they give land to this corporates, individuals, then only they can charge 10%, 12%, 14%. Government securities में they cannot get more than 10%, 6-7%, वही GSECs. So ideally when this deposition has increased, this should increase credit growth, but the credit growth is not increasing. And when there is no credit growth, so this credit growth is not increasing because of both the reasons. Neither the banks wants to lend, no this particular corporates wants to borrow. दोनों ही नहीं चल रहा. They have their own reasons, and this is known as twin balance sheet problem. ठीक है? So first ideally private investment के केस में credit growth should increase, but credit growth नहीं हो रहा. Low capacity utilization is there. Whatever the capacity of this private corporates, they are not utilizing it. The reasons are not much demand. Demand ही नहीं है तो produce करके क्या करेंगे? If the demand of this pen is only 100 units, what this company will do after making 500 pens? They will stop doing things. So that is why there is low capacity utilization by the corporates. The third one we have is the balance sheet problem. And even if you want to export, there is low international demand is there. So यहाँ से भी demand नहीं है, यहाँ से भी they don't want to lend because of something known as twin balance sheet problem. अब वो होता क्या है वो समझ लेते हैं. So in case of India, 75% of the banking sector is under public sector banks. Private sector hardly 25%. ठीक है? So public sector banks, and these are the corporates. यहाँ से start करते हैं. So this twin balance sheet problem or challenge started in 2010. So in these corporates, they started borrowing. They hugely borrowed from the public sector banks when the economy was growing at 8% or 10%. During this 2000 to 2008-9, when they were saying India has already emerged and we are going to grow at the rate of 10% for next 15 to 20 years, just following the footsteps of China. So similarly, they assume that India is going to increase drastically. That is why these private companies borrowed hugely and they started investing. Huge borrowing was there. That changed the huge debt to equity ratio. Over leverage होता है कुछ. Leverage means what? Over leverage firms. ये leverage का मतलब क्या होता है normal terms में?
Like suppose you're using what you already have, the ratio of
Over leverage नहीं, सिर्फ leverage means what? Leverage ratio, leveraging. Leverage in simple terms means you are borrowing with the assumptions that wherever you are going to invest will give you more returns rather than what you have to pay. Why you are sitting in this class? Because you think what you paid is suppose 10,000 or 15,000. In the exam you will get more than 10,000 or 15,000 from this class. That is why you are sitting in this class. That is known as leverage. Whatever you are investing, whether in quantified or non-quantified manner, is known as leverage. So they borrowed with this over leverage firms means they borrowed from the banks at the rate of 8%, 9%, 10% with this particular thinking that they will get 15-20% after the investment. So over leverage firms हो गए which change their debt to equity ratio. ये debt to equity ratio पता है क्या होता है? Suppose this is a firm and you want to start a firm, you want to expand the firm. 3 options. हमेशा बताया. First option is promoter's own money. If I'm the owner of this particular company, my own funds is known as promoter's fund. For example, 10 rupees. Then you can borrow from the banks. Suppose as from SBI you borrowed, but SBI will give you funds only when you have some assets. कुछ तो गिरवी रखना पड़ेगा. Some mortgage is there. So suppose you have a mortgage of 40 rupees. So SBI will give you 40 rupees in the term of loan. That is known as debt. Third option. Dilute the ownership of this particular company. It means equity. Shares दे दो उसके. So suppose you sold the shares of 50 rupees. So you get 50 rupees. This is known as equity. There are some positives of that, there are some negatives of that. Similarly, positives of equity, negatives of equity. So there should be ideally a fixed ratio of debt to equity. If more debt will be there, so India की तरह interest payment will be more. Just like in case of India. If equity will be more, it means when the company will say in the company will be less. So ideally there should be a balance between debt and equity. But suppose this debt is very cheap. You are getting the loans at the rate of 2%, 3%, 4%. So you will borrow more and more in the form of debt rather than diluting the ownership. So that changed their debt to equity ratio. 2 problems. First one was huge borrowings from the public sector banks, and second one is debt to equity ratio change. Finally, when this 2008 bubble burst came, 2005 bubble burst, housing bubble burst, recession came, finally they starting the stalled projects. Demand finish हो गया, पैसा नहीं है, stock market decreased from 17,000 to 7,000. Stalled projects, declining profits, inability to access the equity market, finish हो गया तो 7,000 पे आ गया. Now nobody wants to purchase the shares. So now you cannot borrow through this using this particular way. Banks ने लोन देना बंद कर दिया, equity में कोई खरीद नहीं रहा है. दोनों phase finish. High interest rate because you borrowed at that particular time. And in case of India, we have floating interest rate. Fixed नहीं होता. So when the banks want to charge 8%, they can charge. When they want to charge 5%, 10%, they can charge. This is known as monetary transmission. पढ़ा है? MCLR. एक question आता है. Marginal cost of fund-based lending rate. Why MCLR came instead of base rate? Because of monetary transmission was not happening, because repo rate was not a part of base rate. That is why MCLR came. So that is why the banks can increase or decrease the interest rate because of monetary transmission. And similarly, there was a restricted entry exit because of Chakravarti challenge. Even if you are not performing, you cannot sell the assets. That is known as the Chakravarti challenge. So these were the problems faced by the corporates. When they face this particular problem, inability to pay, payment stopped to the banks. And when they stopped paying to the banks, no new lending. Banks ने lending stop कर दी. Next we have is the no new investment. Corporates ने investment stop कर दिया. Declining gross fixed capital formation. GCFC, the investment in the economy decreased. In 2010, it was 40%. And 2017, it is 29.8%. And when there is no investment in the economy, the production capacity of the economy cannot increase. So that decrease actually the gross fixed capital formation of the economy, finally the slowdown in the economy. And when the inability to pay, now the part played by the banks, stressed assets increase हो गए. अब stressed assets क्या होते हैं? What do you mean by stressed assets?
Interest not paid, taken a loan not paid for
90 days.
30 days.
सोच लो आराम से. You have 30 seconds to cook the lie.
NPS plus substandard assets.
If the payment is due till 90 days, then it's stressed asset.
फिर स्पेशल मेंशन अकाउंट क्या होता है? फिर स्ट्रेस एसेट्स क्या होता है? एसेट्स. स्पेशल मेंशन अकाउंट 0, स्पेशल मेंशन अकाउंट 1 एंड क्या हो गया 90 डेज. 30, 31 to 60, 61 to 90. After 90 days, if there is no return of principal or interest, दोनों में से कुछ भी, it will be converted into NPA. तो यहाँ पूरा ही रहेगा. It will be regarded as, इसको बोलते हैं NPA. अब हो गया आपका ये पर्टिकुलर लोन NPA. Substandard. $90 days to 12 months. उसके बाद सबस्टैंडर्ड के बाद डाउटफुल एसेट. डाउटफुल एसेट कब तक रहता है?
जब तक वो
12 months के बाद, जब तक उसको राइट ऑफ नहीं कर देते या लॉस एसेट नहीं कर देते. अब लॉस एसेट कौन कर सकता है? इंटरनल ऑडिटर कर सकता है और एक्सटर्नल ऑडिटर कर सकता है. दिस इज व्हाट वी हैव. NPA thing is, so after 90 days it NPA thing. 90 days पे it becomes the NPA. अब stressed asset क्या होता है? अब इसमें दो और कंसेप्ट है. something known as restructured loan. And something known as provisioning. कंसेप्ट इसलिए बता रहा हूँ because more of this thing. Editorials are coming related to economy. So if you will be well aware about this concept, तो उस आर्टिकल को पढ़ोगे, otherwise नहीं पढ़ोगे. Restructured loan means whatever the initial payment duration or the amount you have fixed, if you are changing it, is regarded as restructure. Suppose earlier you said you have to return this 100 rupees at the EMI of 10 rupees for 12 months. अगर उसको आपने 10 की जगह 11 कर दिया या 5 कर दिया, 8 कर दिया या 12 months को you increase or decrease, is regarded as restructure. So this is restructured. अब provisioning क्या होता है?
Suppose the bound to go bad, so you account for them and keep some money aside.
Give a certain portion of the profits as a provision.
Because this money is not your money. What is the role of the bank? The role of the bank is intermediation. Intermediation of credit, intermediation of maturity. Suppose you are depositing in the form of savings account and bank is giving for a loan of gestation period of 20 years. It means you are changing the maturity. This is the role played by the banks. You are normally depositing for savings account. It means you can withdraw at any time. But bank gave it for the 20 years. It means maturity intermediation हो रहा है. You gave it for 1 day, 2 day. Banks ने combine किया और उसको 20 years के लिए दे दिया. This is known as maturity intermediation. Similarly, there is liquidity intermediation. ये आजकल काफी टेक्निकल क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा है यूपीएससी प्रीलिम्स में. इंटरनेशनल डॉलर का प्राइस कैसे इंक्रीज डिक्रीज होगा एंड फ्यू वेरी वेरी सिंपल क्वेश्चंस एंड फ्यू वेरी वेरी डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चंस. बीच वाला एवरेज खत्म हो गया. लास्ट एवरेज टाइप क्वेश्चन यूपीएससी आज इन 2013. लिक्विडिटी इंटरमीडिएशन मींस, लिक्विडिटी बताया था क्या होता है?
Different type of assets.
Different type of assets means how easily you can convert the assets, how easily you can trade the assets. So suppose you deposited gold और बैंक ने आपको लोन दे दिया कैश में, तो different liquidity of gold and cash will be there. So this is what different liquidity and all will be there. So this is not your money. The bank has deposited someone's money and suppose the bank gave loan to A और A विजय माल्या बन गया. बैंक तो A को B को नहीं कह सकता कि I cannot return your money. C को भी नहीं कह सकता. So it means always bank has to keep some cushion. दैट इज नोन एज प्रोविजनिंग. अब जैसे जैसे वो एनपीए के डिफरेंट स्टैंडर्ड्स में जाता रहता है, प्रोविजनिंग बढ़ती रहती है. So suppose it is meant before NPA, provisioning will be less. Once it becomes substandard, provisioning will increase because chances, risk of this particular loan has increased. जब वो doubtful asset जाएगा तो provisioning बहुत high हो जाएगा. Now this provisioning you have to keep from the profits. So that is why banks avoid declaring any particular asset as NPA. उस वजह से loss होता है. एक तो present loss हो जाएगा NPA वाला. More and more watch of the RBI will be there. Plus provisioning की वजह से profit decrease हो जाएंगे. This is known as evergreening of loans. अब इसको गूगल कर लेना, होमवर्क लिख लो. What is evergreening of loans? Anyways, so rising stressed assets. So stressed assets includes NPA as well as restructured loans as well as NPA हो गया तो सभी हो गया वो. NPA प्लस restructured प्लस राइट ऑफ, तीनों को मिला के कहते हैं stressed assets. Then नॉन परफॉर्मिंग assets इंक्रीज हो गए, restructured loans इंक्रीज हो गए. They are the sub part of rising stressed assets. Then private sector debt majorly financed by PSB. अब वो वैसे ही 75% है, so obviously PSBs में ही होगा. Then the low asset recovery rate due to difficult exit norms were there. Finally इसका impact हुआ huge exposure to high risk sectors. Majority of the PSB funds they were focused on infrastructure, iron, textile and all this. इसमें international problems था, चाइना वाला and all this करके. Mining में सुप्रीम कोर्ट का इंटरवेंशन था, टेक्सटाइल वाले में बांग्लादेश एंड ऑल का इंक्रीज हो रहा था. रिस्क अवर्स बैंक्स हो गए एंड बैंक्स दे बिकम रिलक्टेंट टू लैंड टू द कॉर्पोरेट्स. सो दिस इज नोन एज ट्विन बैलेंस शीट चैलेंज. इस पे क्वेश्चन नहीं आया मेंस में कभी, एक्सपेक्टेड क्वेश्चन इन 2018. ठीक है. सो दिस इज व्हाट वी हैव द फर्स्ट पार्ट दैट इज नोन एज द ट्विन बैलेंस शीट, जो मुझे एक्सप्लेन करना था. ठीक है. नाउ कम्स की व्हाई देयर वाज अ रीसेंट स्लो डाउन. सो दिस वाज द मेजर रीजन एक्चुअली ऑफ द स्लो डाउन. 4 रीजन डिस्कस किए. क्रेडिट ग्रोथ डिक्रीज हुआ, लो कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन हुआ, बैलेंस शीट प्रॉब्लम हुआ और लो इंटरनेशनल डिमांड वाज देयर. देन वी हैव why it was in news. The news was in focus that 3-year low GDP growth of 5.7% फर्स्ट क्वार्टर में. फर्स्ट पेज पे पढ़ रहे हैं न्यूज इन फोकस, पेज नंबर 14. Then the domestic consumption is decreasing and the fixed capital formation is decreasing. The GDP growth is decreasing. IMF ने कह दिया डिक्रीज हो जाएगा. Then RBI ने डिक्रीज कर दिया, UN bodies ने डिक्रीज कर दिया. Two major reforms, GST demonetization and new economic advisory council to Prime Minister acknowledges that there is economic slowdown. So this is what the background of all this particular article. Now why there is a slowdown in the economy? एक तो हो गया demonetization, सीधा कैश विड्रॉ हो गया and all this backward change links, informal economy, MSME, all these things were affected. The second one we have is the GST. So a lot of glitches were there in the GST and networks. The second reason is because of the high interest rates. So whenever there is very high interest rate, cost of borrowing will be more, and when cost of borrowing will be more, no much investment will be there in the economy. No investment, no growth. Very simple. Then we have the stressed banking sector. वो देख लिया हमने what exactly is the stressed banking sector means. Then what is the solution of this thing? What is the solution of the stressed banking sector? अभी तो गवर्नमेंट लेके आया रिकैपिटलाइजेशन बॉन्ड्स. अब वो क्या होता है, कोई समझा दो मुझे. व्हाट इज रिकैपिटलाइजेशन बॉन्ड? बैंक्स का पैसा बैंक्स को ही दे रहे हो, प्रॉफिट क्या होने वाला है? लॉट ऑफ कार्टून्स वर देयर ऑन दिस रिकैपिटलाइजेशन. हिंदू में बहुत सारे आते हैं. वो एक शिप बना हुआ है, यहाँ पे बोट बना हुआ है, वापस उसको बोल दिया रिकैपिटलाइजेशन. That the government is borrowing from the banks and again the banks are borrowing from the government. उसको कह रहे हैं recapitalization of bonds. Anyways, बोलो what is recapitalization bonds and why government is doing it? NPA को कैसे convert कर दोगे? अभी समझाएं या पढ़ के आओगे? बोलो जल्दी बोलो. Anybody with me saying अभी समझा दें तो पढ़ के आएंगे. एक 15 मिनट्स का ब्रेक लेते हैं, फिर आगे पढ़ेंगे. टू अनाउंसमेंट्स. सैटरडे को आफ्टर 2 o'clock किसी की क्लास होती है? एक. नेक्स्ट कोई क्लास नहीं होती? संडे को क्लास होती है आफ्टर 4 o'clock? नहीं होती. सो टुमारो जो सब्जेक्ट एक्सपर्ट की क्लास है वो पोस्टपोन होगी नेक्स्ट सैटरडे 2:30 to 4. सो टुमारो वी हैव ओनली दिस क्लास. ठीक है, सिर्फ इस वाली. और नेक्स्ट सैटरडे को क्लास होगी वो. सो नेक्स्ट वीकेंड वी हैव सैटरडे को 11 to 2 माई क्लास, 2:30 to 4 सोशल इश्यूज क्लास. संडे को 11 to 2 माई क्लास एंड 2:30 to 4 गवर्नेंस की क्लास. ठीक है, सी यू गाइज इन 15 minutes. क्या पढ़ा है ना?
Why slowdown in the economy? Stress banking sector. How to solve twin balance sheet problem? Recapitalization.
ठीक है. So twin balance sheet issue we discussed, and then next I gave you the homework of recapitalization of banks. Recapitalization bonds for the banks, actually how they are going to the funds which will be borrowed by an independent entity, just like PG Naik committee was set up. PG Naik recommended something known as
अच्छा बैंक बोर्ड
वो तो implement हो गया. Bank Board Bureau is a part of Indradhanush. Bank Investment Company BIC should be established as a company, and whatever are the holdings of government in this PSBs should be given to a separate. Suppose this is one bank, this is second bank, this is third bank, this is fourth bank, and these are the government holdings in SBI, PNB and all these banks. So what PJ Naik said, all these things should be given to a separate company known as Bank Investment Company, and it should be established under a Companies Act, corporate body, and if required, a government investment in this can be less than 51%, or we can say 49%. So that PJ Naik said that the major problem of public sector banks is due to the dual control of RBI and Ministry of Finance. Private sector banks have only one regulation of RBI as the regulator, but in case of public sector banks, there is a dual control of RBI as well as private RBI as well as Ministry of Finance. Because of there is more than 51% of government in these banks, that is why there is some extra vigilance. CVC लगेगा, CBI लगेगा, RTI लगेगा. All these entities are applicable to PSBs, but all these entities are not applicable to the private banks. That is why they said सारा शेयर दे दो BIC को, and if you want to remove this extra vigilance, so BIC का शेयर government share in. What will be there in the recapitalization banks? Exact picture right now has not been given by the government, but the concept is for the second time being implemented in India. First time being implemented in I think 1989 to 2001, first lot. This is for the second time. What this recapitalization of bonds is going to do is, again it is going to create a separate company. This will be the separate company, and suppose this is the private shareholders. ये government की shareholding है, and this is private shareholders. What it is going to do is going to increase this liquidity of the government. कैसे increase करेगा? Selling me. This will be borrowed by a separate entity, and this particular separate entity will borrow the funds. They will issue bonds. It means one way we can say the government is issuing the bonds, but government is not doing it. Government is doing it in some other way because of where government is not directly issuing the bonds because of fiscal deficit. If government directly will issue the bonds, is going to increase the fiscal deficit of the government. So that is why government has created a separate entity, and this particular entity is going to borrow from the market. Such type of expenditure is known as off-budget expenditure. Can be asked in the exam, what is off-budget expenditure? Was very much in news in Economic Survey Volume 1 because the states are doing it. Rather than directly borrowing from the markets, states are borrowing indirectly through their public sector entities. So they created public sector entities. Now these public sector entities are borrowing from the market rather than the states directly borrowing. Similarly, in this case, rather than directly borrowing from the market, अब ये गवर्नमेंट है, उसका शेयर है, उसको समझ लो अच्छे से. This is the share of the government in all these public sector banks. So rather than government borrowing from the market and giving to these banks, because government is the owner of these banks, government to create a separate entity who is going to borrow from the market, so that these borrowings will not be on the accounts of the government, rather than will be accounts on the this new entity, which will be a separate entity, not the government. Government का share होगा उसमें 100%, but that is not a part of the government. That will not be a part of the fisc. Fisc के अंदर नहीं आएगा, separate entity आएगा. So this is again a classic example of off-budget expenditure. Now this particular company, and then they are going to borrow. यहाँ से borrow किया. Of the lending is done by the banks only. Banks के लिए पैसा purchase कौन कर रहा है? Banks ही purchase कर रहे हैं. Who is going to purchase it? Common man. Very rarely you borrow. Banks are going to borrow it. Banks के यहाँ से borrow किया, इसको दे दिया वापस से पैसा, ये पैसा वापस से बैंक में लगा दिया. अब मुझे ये बताओ ये सब किया क्यों? कंसेप्ट समझ में आ रहा है? एक बार वापस बता देता हूं, या समझ में आ रहा है? The same amount of funds, these are the public sector banks we have. Now in public sector banks, the majority shareholding is of the government. So what government is doing is, government is giving this shareholding to a separate entity that will be held by the government 100%, very much similar to bank investment company recommended by PG Nayak. Now this company is going to issue the bonds known as recapitalization bonds. Recapitalization bonds, when they will be issued by this company, will be bought by somebody? No, here in this case in Indian economy, this somebody is mostly by banks. So banks ही borrow करेंगे इसको. So banks ने यहाँ वाला पैसा यहाँ दे दिया जो उसके पास ऑलरेडी रखा है. इस पैसे का ये कंपनी क्या करेगी? बैंक्स में ही लगाएगी. That is too obvious. So why all this? What is the rationale behind it?
So SLR, so this is for SLR requirement.
नहीं SLR नहीं, SLR तो fulfill कर रहे हैं हम. Clear the balance sheet, because these banks are having extra liquidity and nobody is going to taking loans from the banks. Credit growth नहीं हो रहा है. Only option is give to the government. This government is committing that I am going to borrow. So because of this extra liquidity with the banks, these banks are going to purchase it. When these banks are going to purchase it, now whatever extra funds that will come to these banks, अब वो उसको use करेंगे write off के लिए, provisioning के लिए. So rather than directly doing it for write off, shareholder भी है. So सिर्फ government shareholding से borrow करेगा. This particular एक new entity बना दिया on the basis of the government shareholding only. Now this particular entity is going to borrow from the market, and this borrowing will be used by the banks for this write-off provisioning and to solve the NPA issue. The purpose is whatever extra liquidity with the banks which nobody is borrowing should be used to clear the NPA write-off and provisionings. कुछ कुछ समझ में आया, कुछ कुछ नहीं आया.
Why they are going to this route? Like already they have excess funds. Why don't they use for?
ये वाले ऑब्जेक्ट करेंगे ना, आप सीधा राइट ऑफ करोगे तो इसका शेयर प्राइस डिक्रीज हो जाएगा. If the banks will start using the funds force of write off के लिए यूज कर लिया, एनपीए के लिए यूज कर लिया. So suppose the write off 2 lakh crores, 3 lakh crores, 5 lakh crores is something. शेयर मार्केट में शेयर प्राइस डिक्रीज हो जाएगा. That is what. So सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट शेयर, this minority shareholding shareholders you have to protect. That is why they are doing all this through this new mechanism that is known as RCBs. So कुछ कुछ ड्रॉ कर लो.
सर वो जो कंपनी गवर्नमेंट ने बनाई उसमें बॉन्ड इशू किया तो कुछ इंटरेस्ट पे किया होगा.
हाँ, वो इंटरेस्ट गवर्नमेंट देगा. 9,000 करोड़ का इंटरेस्ट है, गवर्नमेंट देगा. दैट विल बी अ पार्ट ऑफ द अगेन रेवेन्यू इंटरेस्ट में जो दे रहा है. सो दिस बॉन्ड्स विल नॉट बी अ पार्ट ऑफ फिस्कल डेफिसिट, बट दैट इंटरेस्ट विल बी अ पार्ट ऑफ गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर. वो रेवेन्यू एक्सपेंडिचर का पार्ट होगा.
कल को फिर अगर प्रिंसिपल अमाउंट भी रिटर्न करना होगा बैंक को
तो कंपनी रिटर्न करेगी, उसको गवर्नमेंट देगा आफ्टर 5 years 10 years और समथिंग. द इशू इज टू सॉल्व दिस प्रॉब्लम विच इज एट प्रेजेंट द प्रॉब्लम इज, उसको सॉल्व. इट इज वेरी मच सिमिलर टू मार्केट स्टेबलाइजेशन स्कीम. एमएसएस में क्या करते हो आप? सपोज एक्सेस ऑफ डॉलर इज कमिंग इन द इकोनॉमी, too much of dollar, and whenever the dollar comes in the economy you have to convert into rupee. So too much of liquidity in the economy, inflation हो जाएगा. solution क्या है? ये कुछ एक्स्ट्रा रुपी को निकाल लो मार्केट से. निकालोगे कैसे? RBI will issue the bonds. बॉन्ड इशू करेगा, इन रिटर्न करेंसी आ जाएगा. आफ्टर 5 years 10 years बॉन्ड मैच्योर होगा, वापस चला जाएगा. सॉल्यूशन शुड बी जो प्रेजेंट प्रॉब्लम है उसको रिजॉल्व करेंगे. नाउ इट डिपेंड्स ऑन द मैच्योरिटी पीरियड की ये कितना होगा. राइट नाउ वी डोंट नो कितना मैच्योरिटी पीरियड. दिस इज जस्ट अ कंसेप्ट. रिकैपिटलाइजेशन बॉन्ड कंसेप्ट इज कैन बी आस्क्ड इन द एग्जाम. इंपॉर्टेंट कंसेप्ट. अब प्रॉफिट टू गवर्नमेंट क्या होने वाला है, प्रॉफिट टू बैंक्स क्या होने वाला है, एंड प्रॉफिट टू जनरल पब्लिक क्या होने वाला है. इसको लिख लो, एक एक पॉइंट है. गवर्नमेंट को क्या प्रॉफिट होगा?
इम्प्रूव द रेटिंग.
इंप्रूव द रेटिंग से क्या होगा? रेटिंग ऑफ द पीएसबी, उससे क्या होगा? शेयर प्राइसेस इंक्रीज होंगे. और मेजॉरिटी शेयर तो गवर्नमेंट का है, सो गवर्नमेंट के शेयर प्राइस इंक्रीज होंगे. गवर्नमेंट विल गेट मोर डिविडेंड. फर्स्ट प्रॉफिट इज गवर्नमेंट विल गेट मोर डिविडेंड. and price gains to dividend and price gains from PSB shares. बैंक्स को क्या प्रॉफिट होने वाला है? कैसे? एक तो एक्सेस फंड आ जाएंगे राइट ऑफ के लिए, एनपीए इशू के लिए. फर्स्ट सेकंड, यहाँ इंटरेस्ट भी तो मिलेगा. ये जो बॉन्ड गवर्नमेंट परचेज कर रहा है, रफ वैल्यू द गवर्नमेंट गिव इज 9,000 crore annually. So banks are getting extra 9,000 crore as the interest payment. So this will be the profit of the banks. पब्लिक को क्या प्रॉफिट होगा? More credit, interest rate will decrease and there will not be any increase in taxation and all these things. वो जो मोदी साहब हर चीज के लिए टैक्स ले आते हैं वो चला जाएगा. This is public sector recapitalization bonds. ठीक है. The next reason of slowdown is because of the inability of public investment to pick up. ये डिस्कस कर लिया. गवर्नमेंट के पास फंड्स ही नहीं है. देयर इज अ कंस्ट्रेंट ऑफ 3.5% ऑफ द फिस्कल डेफिसिट. उससे एक्सेस जा नहीं सकते, पैसा है नहीं. सो इट इज द इनएबिलिटी ऑफ द पब्लिक सेक्टर टू फंड मोर. वो डायग्राम से ऊपर है. कौन सा पेज नंबर है? 15. पेज नंबर 15. Then next we have is the persistent underperformance of agriculture. So from 2012-13 agriculture is roughly at the average growth of 1.5% or something. Farmer distress, farmer suicide and all is a common problem nowadays. So agriculture is not performing well, and agriculture is the provides raw material for majority of the manufacturing items. Major thing is 70% of the population is dependent on agriculture, and Indian economy is internal demand driven rather than external demand driven. अब 70% लोगों के पास ही पैसा नहीं होगा तो डिमांड तो खत्म होगी. If there is no demand, there will not be any production of goods and services. So this is why all these are the reasons that you have to focus on the agriculture. Agriculture का multi-dimensional diagram था ये. कि this is how the impact of the agriculture sector on various social, economic, environmental and international issues. So social इसमें पड़ेगा sex ratio, migration is going to take place, womanization of the agriculture. Then we have the poverty. Majority of the poverty is based on the agriculture of the rural areas. The nutritional demands can be fulfilled only by the agriculture. Migration problems will be there. So all these are related to the social of agriculture. It provides employment. 70% population dependent on this, direct as well as indirect employment. Then farmers' suicide will be there. Dependency of other sectors, specifically manufacturing. Then we have fiscal deficit will be there. अब loan waiver दोगे 1 lakh crores का तो fiscal deficit increase हो जाएगा. Then inflation will be there, specifically the food inflation. In case of environment, there will be soil salination, climate change. We already discussed. Water table will decrease, fertilizer and all these things. So all these things again of agriculture. Then international exports, WTO, strategic dependence, balance of payment, land grabbing. All these are the dimensions which are related to the agriculture. That is why you have to focus more towards agriculture. And agriculture is not performing. So that is why there is a slowdown. And next we have is, or the last one we have is the falling exports. This also we discussed. Roughly it decreased from 15-16% to 12%. 11-12% and all. Because of एक तो international demand है, international demand decreased. Second, because of high inflation, या inflation की वजह से decrease होगा. In comparison to those economies, international inflation we are talking about, not within India. So when there is inflation in the economy, or what is the relationship of inflation versus export and appreciation versus export? Inflation बता दो, जल्दी बोलो. Export will fall in both the cases. Anybody else? Third is both, fourth is none. ऑप्शन हो गए 4. बोथ. अब ये ऑप्शन लग रहा है. बोलो, वहां लास्ट से पूछते हैं. बोलो सर. When inflation increases, export increase होता है क्या? Depends भी करता है ये. In economics, nothing depends. You have to compartmentalize the concepts and give the answer. Otherwise, everything is related. You are sitting in the class is affecting the economy of Germany. Some way. So compartmentalize. ये economics में बहुत आता है. In the exam में कुछ थोड़ा conceptual question आ जाता है prelims में. So when you overthink, so answer wrong. So compartmentalize the concept and solve the answer. Anyways, it doesn't depend on anything. It's a clear-cut relationship. First is right or wrong? Inflation increase होगा तो export increase होगा. Anybody with me saying increase? So don't trust the faculty. So inflation increase होगा तो export decrease होगा.
Sir, but if inflation increases, rupee value will reduce.
Rupee value पूछ ही नहीं रहे सर. जितना पूछा उतना बताएंगे बस. वो appreciation depreciation तो second वाले concept में जाएगा. This is not related. You are saying कि when inflation increase the rupee value appreciate depreciate depends on whether India is exporting country or importing country.
Yeah, but you asked for export will increase or reduce.
I didn't said कि this is only for India. Question में लिखा India. In case of India only, this is the scenario because we are importing the materials which cannot be replaced. ऑयल को इंपोर्ट करते हैं. ऑयल मेजरली यूज होता है. ट्रांसपोर्टेशन में इंक्रीज होगा, एप्रिसिएशन डेप्रिसिएशन होगा. उसको छोड़ के दिस इज अ नॉर्मल क्वेश्चन. व्हेन इन्फ्लेशन इंक्रीजेस द एक्सपोर्ट डिक्रीजेस. व्हेन देयर इज एप्रिसिएशन ऑफ द इकोनॉमी एक्सपोर्ट डिक्रीज होगा, वेल्थ केस ऑफ चाइना, वो जानबूझ के डेप्रिशिएट कर रहा है ताकि एक्सपोर्ट इंक्रीज होता रहे। ये भी गलत हो गया, आंसर हो गया नन। सिंपल क्वेश्चन, बाकी नहीं है तो गूगल कर लेना। सो फॉलोइंग एक्सपोर्ट्स बिकॉज ऑफ एप्रिशिएटिंग रुपीज 7 to 10% इंक्रीज हो गया दिस ईयर। 67, 68 था, 64, 65, 63 के आसपास चल रहा है। देन वी हैव दिस डायग्राम, whenever there is lower incomes, उसको समझ लो डायग्राम को, whenever there is lower incomes is going to reduce the consumption demand because expenditure increase होगा, which is going to affect the demand side of the economy. Lower incomes से lower demand, which is going to decrease the private investment. Demand ही नहीं है तो private investment नहीं होगा. When there is a decline in the private investment, lower capital formation होगा, companies का expansion नहीं, buildings and all. When there is no capital formation, is going to reduce the productive capacity of the economy. There will not be any increase in infrastructure and all. No need of infrastructure. When there will be decreasing productive capacity of the economy, is going to cause the supply side constraints. Road ही नहीं है, infrastructure ही नहीं है, is going to cause the supply side constraints. And when there will be supply side constraints, there will be lower output. Lower output, lower economic growth. Again unemployment, again lower income. So it becomes a vicious cycle. समझ में आ रहा है? Then we have news analysis. Why recent slowdown is perceived as a temporary phenomena? So 2-3 statements, World Bank, IMF and all, they said that this recent slowdown is an aberration, temporary है because of two major reforms, two major structural reforms of Indian economy, GST and demonetization. So from hardcore economics concept wise, this GST and demonetization are good steps for the economy. From an economic, और सूरज भल्ला जैसा यही कहेगा, सूरज भल्ला इंडियन एक्सप्रेस अपने लेवल की इकोनॉमिक्स लिखता है वो मैक्रो इकोनॉमी। अकॉर्डिंग टू सूरज भल्ला एंड ऑल, दिस इज द वेरी गुड स्टेप्स, बहुत पहले से वेट हो रहा था इनका। बट एज पर द नॉर्मल, एज द इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी पर्सपेक्टिव एंड ऑल दिस थिंग, दिस कैन बी अ बैड स्टेप, बट फ्रॉम द लॉन्ग टर्म पर्सपेक्टिव, जीएसटी एंड डिमोनेटाइजेशन बोथ आर गुड स्टेप्स फॉर इंडिया. Is going to create cash crunch for the time period only. Growth will return, and when demonetization will replace this grey economy to the formal economy, is going to increase the tax base of the country. More tax base, more fiscal space with the government, more capital formation by the government. Then GST reform is there, is going to formalize the supply chain structures. Input tax credit easy hoga and all. Then the next reason of why it is a slowdown is rising global petroleum prices. So 40-35 dollars per barrel से 60 के आसपास, now it is stable 65. The next reason is insolvency and bankruptcy code, also known as the creative destruction of the capital. Insolvency and bankruptcy code. इसका भी एक वीडियो है, what exactly are the features of insolvency and bankruptcy code, उसको देख लेना. इंसॉल्वेंसी एंड बैंक्रप्सी मोस्ट प्रोबेबली नेक्स्ट वीकेंड पे कवर करेंगे. वेरी रिलेवेंट टॉपिक्स फ्रॉम एग्जाम पर्सपेक्टिव. देन द रिसेंट ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस इंक्रीज बाय 30 पॉइंट्स, कल कवर करेंगे इसको. देन व्हाई इट इज परसीव्ड टू बी अ परमानेंट फिनोमेना. सो इंडियन इकोनॉमी की जितनी भी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं उसमें तो कुछ चेंज ही नहीं हुआ. ऑल आर सेम. लेबर रिफॉर्म्स में इशू है, लैंड रिफॉर्म्स में इशू है. ओनली ऑन द सुपरफिशियल लेवल यू हैव चेंज दिस थिंग्स. सो व्हाई इट इज रिगार्डेड एज अ परमानेंट फिनोमेना? बिकॉज ऑफ द अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट इशू इज देयर. सो एमएसएमई गॉन, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट एक्चुअल फिगर्स हैज इंक्रीज. वेज इशू है इंडिया में. द प्रॉब्लम ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट इन इंडिया इज नॉट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, इट इज अंडर एम्प्लॉयमेंट एंड वेज एम्प्लॉयमेंट is almost 5% only, which is not high. The problem is the average wage of India is 3,500 to 4,000. That's it. So the problem of India is not employment, it is underemployment or wage. Then we have, if there is more and more digitalization, then artificial intelligence is there. Then we have fourth industrial revolution is there. More automation is going to take place. More automation means less need of the employees will be there. Again is going to cause the unemployment in the economy. Then we have the fiscal targets. So fiscal targets you are saying 3.2%. So fiscal targets आपको fix रखना है. For example, this is the government expenditure and it should be 3.2% only. Then how to increase the expenditure or how to solve this problem? Change the quality of expenditure. Rather than doing the quality, investing in the assets, invest in the revenue. Always the government can do it. Invest in the subsidies and all. Next year election, next to next year there are elections. So very high chances that the quality of expenditure under this thing is going to deteriorate. Then there are rigid labor laws are there. Again, some tweaking of the labor laws are done by the state governments by taking assent from the president, but not any holistic. Whole of the government reforms नहीं हो रहा है. Adhocism basis पे piecemeal approach में चल रहा है बस. Rajasthan, UP, MP, few states have done some reforms, but not whole of the government reforms. Then we have the land market issues, the land acquisition, environmental clearances, bureaucratic jungle is again a problem. They are causing delays. Then we have the agriculture sector. वो discuss कर लिया. The agriculture sector is again not much investment in the agriculture sector. Manufacturing sector is again constant from last 30 years. कितना share है manufacturing का? Manufacturing का share in GDP 16-17% same from last 25 years, almost same. Industries का share कितना है? Services का and agriculture का. एग्रीकल्चर का शेयर 17-18%. वो 14 पहुंच गया था, फिर उन्होंने जीडीपी बेस ईयर रिवाइज कर दिया, उधर के आइटम यहाँ ले आए. देन वी हैव सर्विसेज एंड वी हैव इंडस्ट्रीज. इंडस्ट्रीज कितना है? 29-30% लगा लो रफली. बचा हुआ इसमें आ जाएगा 53-54% के आसपास. ठीक है, वो एग्जैक्टली चेंज हो गया. एट द टाइम ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस जो सर्विस था वो एग्रीकल्चर, जो एग्रीकल्चर वो सर्विस, देखा था उसमें. Anyways, then we have the service sector again. So the service sector of India is mainly dependent on the international demand. International demand में protectionism हो रहा है, deglobalization हो रहा है, Trump साहब, so that is going to decrease the growth of service sector. Then low investment and exports, this also we discussed. So because of all these things, it is regarded as, it is not a short term impact, it is be a permanent problem. Then the recent, वही same simple reasons हैं, उसको पढ़ लेना. वे फॉरवर्ड में हमेशा लिखना है, होल ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट रिफॉर्म, स्ट्रक्चरल रिफॉर्म्स होने चाहिए, पीसमिल नहीं होना चाहिए, एडहॉकिज्म नहीं होना चाहिए. क्वेश्चन देख लो इसका. Answer? Question number 1, answer is? Answer is simple, A. Question number 2, answer? Anybody with me saying A? Or B? B for Bombay. कुछ डाउट है इसमें? आंसर इज बी. वाई यू हैव नॉट कंफ्यूज बाय गेटिंग मोर लोन्स? कौन लोन्स लेगा, कौन नहीं लेगा? नहीं, लोन गवर्नमेंट ले रहा है या कोई और ले रहा है? फिस्कल कंसोलिडेशन मीन्स फिस्क, एंड फिस्क मीन्स treasury of the government. Always it means consolidated fund of India. Fisc is a term which can only be used for the government, so that is why fiscal consolidation is related to government only. कहाँ यूज करना है इसको? स्लो डाउन सब में यूज हो जाएगा. जितना भी फैक्चुअल इंफॉर्मेशन है सबका एक सेपरेट 2 पेज की शीट बना लेना एंड यूज इट अक्रॉस द पेपर्स 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6.